is important. This group is important because it constitutes around 40% of our population in India. Therefore, it is very, very important. And number two is the children. This group, if you see, that they are the most physically active group also. And when we talk about the COVID-19 disease, this pandemic, the most of the activities of the children are now being restricted, be it related to the education or whether it is related to even daily physical activity in form of the games and other things also. Everything has been restricted. And you must, now we had few days ago, Deepavali and other festival season. So even those times, the activities of the children was affected also. Restriction of these kind of the activities, how they affect the children, psychology and other things, I think that is going to be discussed today also. That is a very important thing. Another thing is, if somebody becomes COVID positive also, any child or the children, then they got admitted in a hospital. So we have some experience with these children, or even very small child, or even in the neonatal or in the infant phase also. Even if the mother is negative, then they got admission only with the mother or with the father or any other family member. So these are the very important issue. If a child become COVID positive, so what is the reaction from the child as well as from the family, because the family has to cope with the difficulties that are faced by the children when he or she become positive. I think they are very, very interesting the topics that have been has to be discussed over here. And with these words, let us proceed for the program now. And I request Dr. Vinita Agarwal to take over. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for the opening comments. I request Dr. Sonia Nityanan, who is the Executive Registrar, to please give a brief introduction of the speakers.
Professor Dhiman, Director, SGPGI, Professor Vinita Agarwal, Faculty in Charge, Bioethics Cell, and all the very distinguished speakers for this program today and the participants. At the outset, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to everyone, and especially acknowledge and thank the speakers for today's program. We are very, very honored to have Dr. Sidhole with us. He is a legendary person in child psychiatry, and we are very, he's also been my teacher and Dr. Dhiman's teacher in AGMC, and we remember his lectures. They were very good lectures on child psychiatry. And then after that, he was the HOD of the Department of Psychiatry. So we're very honored to have you, sir. And apart from that, we have some very good, we have two very charismatic young people with us, you know, Ms. Kea Singh and Mihir Dabadghav. It's interesting because Mihir's mother is also speaking today, Dr. Preeti Dabadghav. So it's going to be a perspective of Mihir and his mother, Dr. Preeti. Then we have Dr. Anshu Shrivastava, who is from the Department of Pediatric Gastroenterology, and of course, Dr. B.L. Bhatia, who is from the Department of Endocrinology. And then we have Anshul Gupta from the Department of Hematology, who has a lot of experience in managing children with blood cancers during this COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, Dr. Preeti Dabadghav. So very warm welcome and thank you for agreeing to be speakers for this program. And welcome to all the participants. This is our 6th program, and This is a commitment from the institute to the UP government to our Honorable Minister for Medical Education, Suresh Khanna ji, that we will regularly hold these medical ethics, inculcate the spirit and philosophy of ethical practices and compassionate behavior in our management of patients. So we are now in the 6th program. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your kind words. We have Dr. Prabhat Prasitle with us. He has also been my teacher at KGMC, and we remember, sir, he was the most soft-spoken person, and that was psychiatry posting. We remember his lectures and how beautifully he could present whatever he wanted to say. So thank you, sir, for connecting. We request now Dr. Prabhat Chitle to please present his views on what are the ethical challenges and psychological concerns that the children have been facing during the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you, sir. Please come.
Dr. Sithole, good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for asking me to be the part of this group. It's very nice being among you. And I will talk to you briefly about what can be done to children during these times. I mean, during this times of COVID pandemic. Well, I should say that there is no evidence right now that children who actually have been infected with COVID-19 have any specific kind of psychiatric disorder. Nor there is evidence that there is a general rise in prevalence of psychiatric disorders in the community because of COVID-19 pandemic. And we have not examined the survivors of COVID-19 infection, children I mean. So we do not know what kind of psychiatric disorders people who are infected with COVID-19 have. There is no definitive evidence. But a lot of speculation has been made, and it is said that because of the restrictions which are imposed upon the children because of this pandemic, and the fact that the family members are all living together, they are cooped up together in a limited space of the house, children can have more stresses and tensions, and this can result in anxiety and depression in them. But this is only speculation. But perhaps the anxiety and depression that they have is not at the disorder, but it can be called a reaction. I mean, their reaction to these difficult situations. Now, during this COVID pandemic, what happens is that children are not allowed out, so they cannot go out and play with their friends. Also, the contact with their friends is limited because you can call them only on telephone or on your mobile. And there is a general restriction of this kind. You cannot go out, you cannot eat outside, you're not going to school. So you have to remain at home. And if the family members are all living together, then at all the times, then perhaps they get on each other's nerves. If the parents are having some kind of marital disharmony or tension among themselves, that this reflects upon the children as well, because they are forced to listen to what's happening at home. If there is any violence, then they are forced to witness it. And the parents are also disciplining the children more because they are present at most of the time. Otherwise, the parents are going out to work and the children have some free time. But during this pandemic of COVID, the children are at home and they are facing more stresses. Then they have to study from whatever educational programs are available online. either from the school or from elsewhere. Now they're reading it on mobile or sometimes on laptop and whatever facilities are available. And this can again cause tensions because things may not be as understandable as they would be in a classroom. And this is being done, after all, for the first time in our country. But it's possible that some children adapt to these and others don't. And they can have anxiety and depression and anger, and such things could occur in them. So, what could be done? National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, Bangalore, have made certain guidelines, and these guidelines are available on Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India. And they suggest very practical and common sense things like that the communication among the family members and the children must continue. You must give time to the children, they must talk to them, and they must address their concerns. If they are about studies, about play, or whatever it is. So, talking to children is one thing, and explaining to them whatever their about COVID-19 infection and the restrictions which are imposed upon them are for their own good and for the family and for the society. So if these things are explained to the children, I think they'll be better off. They will have less tensions and they will be able to understand these things. Now, in the principles of ethics in relation to medical practice, giving information about the disease or its treatment is a very important thing. After all, you take an informed consent from the patient. In this case, since they are children, from their family members. So likewise, in normal children also, they need an explanation about what COVID-19 infection is and how we are dealing with it. And this can be done by a lot of information is available on the net, and I think the family members, the parents are also becoming aware, so they can explain these things in a simple language which can be understood by the children using the words they are familiar with. They can explain about COVID-19 and how it can be prevented. Then games and some kind of play should be arranged for children at home, and they can go out in the open, they can go out in the field and play there. That can be done with restrictions. After all, in open spaces, the chances of infection are less in comparison to what chances are there in an enclosed space like in a room. So going out is all right. Taking a cycle out, cycling is all right. Wearing a mask, and such things can be done. Only strenuous exercises need to be avoided. Now, I would like to ask the group, I mean, is it the sort of thing that you wish to listen to or something else? I mean, do you have any specific issues that you wish me to address? I said that there are no psychiatric disorders which have been identified in relation to COVID-19. So talking to children, communicating with them, helping with them their school tasks, arranging for play, such things are explaining to them about COVID-19. These are the things which are important.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your comments. We were just wondering if you have been facing any, so you have already clarified that there are none increased psychiatric problems that you have seen over time. Maybe as time goes by, we will get more information about it. The other thing is, do you think there are any issues, ethical concerns as it has been handled for children in India as compared to the West or other countries? Do you think there has been a difference of what can be done or how it has been handled, the problem of COVID-19 and the children, how they have handled it?
Since we are dealing with normal children who are not affected by COVID-19, so I don't think anything special needs to be said. And I don't think there are any differences the way children are handled in the West, except that there is far more autonomy. I mean, children are far more expressive there in comparison to India. In our society, children are expected always to behave in a certain manner, obey the parents, obey the family members, obey the teachers, not ask too many questions, not be very independent. I mean, such differences are there. But apart from that, I don't think there are any other differences. And I do not think there are any ethical concerns in relation to children in their brought up or in their rearing up during COVID pandemic times, except that the children need to be explained about what COVID-19 and what can be done to prevent it.
Thank
You
you,
see,
sir.
I would like to say just one more thing. You see, in 1984, MIC, methyl isocyanate, leaked out in Bhopal. And those who were exposed to it, I mean the children, among them, there was a non-specific rise in psychiatric disorders. We know this because we conducted that study on behalf of the ICMR. But there were no specific psychiatric disorders that increased in children who were exposed to MIC. If, on the other hand, if you look at viral encephalitis that occurs in eastern UP, then among survivors, there are specific psychiatric disorders which are increased. We do not have such information in relation to COVID-19 yet.
Yes, sir. We agree that over time, maybe we will have more information which will be available in the public domain, and then we will get to know what are the different things that are related to children. Thank you so much, sir, for connecting. It was really nice to look at you and see you and listen to you after such a long time. Thank you, sir, for being there.
Thank you. I am grateful.
Now we move on to the other exciting area. Now, this is the first time in the medical seminar that we have children who will be connecting, and we are looking forward to listening to them. We will be talking about what is their perspective on COVID-19 and how do they think they have dealt with it, and what has been the restrictions related to COVID-19, how has their life changed. So first of all, I'll request Ms. Kea Singh. She's a daughter of Dr. Brijesh Singh, a surgeon in our general hospital. She's a student of class 12 and she lives in the SGPGI campus. I request Ms. Kea Singh
Yes,
to talk about it.
a very good afternoon to one and all present here. Today, I, Kia Singh, am going to talk about the topic living with Corona. It has been quite a journey while living in Corona times. As a student, I've had my share of experiences, good and bad, which I'm here to share with you all today. When lockdown started, it felt like a party that was evergreen. Not having to wake up on alarms was truly a dream come true. Attending classes in casual wear was a golden time indeed. But we're all aware of the fact that the universe can't stay balanced until teachers make sure that students are tortured enough. Correct me if I'm wrong, teachers have all the knowledge in the world, except from one simple fact that students also have the same 24 hours as they do. I think it's a tough fight between sanitizer companies and our school assignments as to which is growing at a faster rate. However, a lot of time is saved by cutting down transportation time from one destination to another. In the past few months, I've had a lot of time to focus on career planning and extracurricular activities, for which most of us didn't have time before. Some of us even tried journaling for the first time. And in my honest opinion, it resulted in a lot more productivity throughout the day than when I skipped it. One of the biggest issues most students faced was time management and productivity. Still, most of us coped up well with it. One thing I know for sure is that I'm never going to be homesick again. Don't get me wrong, I do love spending time with my family. But then again, how much family time is too much family time? Screen time is another issue I assume we all are facing. The 9 to 5 American dream job does not look like a dream anymore because sitting in front of a computer screen for these many hours is quite exhausting. Due to excessive screen time, my eyes even got red, and me being the hypochondriac that I am, thought I was going to complete the spectacles family. But luckily, that didn't happen yet. Even my dog Coco, who always used to get excited when we came back from school or any other outing, is now wishing for guests, as he is sick of seeing the same four faces every day fighting for his attention. Lastly, I'd like to say, in all seriousness, that no matter in how many ways we try to make our lives better through technology, nothing will ever compete with real human interaction with all our teachers, friends, and family. I hope that this crucial time comes to an end and everything would get back to normal again. Granted, everyone takes necessary precautions as needed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kia. That was really wonderful. And I agree with you. In fact, all of us agree with you that interaction is our life. And we as teachers and also as students in everyday life, we miss the interaction that we have with people around us. So completely we echo your words. Thank you so much for presenting it so beautifully. It was really nice to have you here. Thank you, Kia. So now we move on to the other exciting presenter, Mr. Mihir Dabadgaon. As Dr. Sonia has already talked about, he is a little older. He is a third-year student in engineering. And I know their perspective, we are thinking that their perspective may be a little different. So we look forward to listening to Mihir. So Mihir, please, we like to share your experiences and your words.
Actually, I'm having some problem with my webcam, so I'm not being able to start my video.
So you can continue with the voice.
Okay, okay, thank you. Good afternoon. I am Mihir Sunil Dabadgaon, third year student of the BITS Pilani University Chemical Engineering Department. I will share my views and experience as a college student unexpectedly stuck at home since March because of this pandemic. Initially, to me as a college student, the unexpected news of a bunch of holidays actually cheered me up as it gave me the opportunity to spend some quality time with my family and especially with my brother who came back home from Germany just to celebrate Holi with me. However, when the nationwide lockdown was announced, the enormity of the situation actually dawned on me. I realized for the first time that we were in for the long haul. First of all, I would like to give due credit to my institute as they responded promptly by conducting online classes within the week to salvage whatever was left of the academic semester. Initially, I enjoyed the new experience of attending online classes in the comfort of my home, not washing my clothes or making my bed, cleaning my room, or even eating the same mess food day in and day out was sheer bliss. But as the semester progressed and I started attending more and more of these online classes, the online academic programs started taking a toll on me both physically and mentally. In my view, the biggest drawback of this mode of education is that there has been a total lack of practical hands-on and laboratory experienced work. I can speak for my course, chemical engineering, that I was scheduled to have a laboratory based course this semester, but that had to be postponed. Moreover, direct interaction with the teachers and our lecturers have not been possible. I realized it too late, but not having a personal rapport with our professors and other faculty members has its own disadvantage. It is now apparent that this is going to negatively affect the possibility of getting a good recommendation in the future for any future job or a future education. Moreover, the biggest thing that troubled me was that we missed out on a lot of 9 months worth of college life. And actually, I missed out on two technological and cultural fests of my college, Pearl and Atmos, which offer a lot of personality development opportunities. But more than that is what I believe that students have realized, that this has taken an enormous toll on their mental health. Students are openly confessing on various social media confession pages that about being irritable and depressed. The main reasons are the absence of personal and formal contact with our college friends and fellow batchmates, and an incessant number of assessments and evaluations, which is a result of overcompensation on part of the faculty for not having a classroom oriented teaching program. Personally, I have faced more than 80, 90 evaluations in a 100-day semester. So this situation has become so bad that the students in my institute for the first time are protesting against conducting online end semester examinations. This has severely soured the atmosphere and has caused a strain in the relationship between faculty and students. So, in conclusion, I would like to say, even though the vaccine is close by, I feel it is a duty of every person to take due precautions to prevent the spread of the infection and to finally end this pandemic so that 2021 does not turn out to be an annus horribilis, a horrible year, just like 2020. Thank you.
Thank you, Meher. That was really nice. Nice to have your views. And we completely agree that in spite of all the online teaching that we are trying and everyone is trying to hold, it is really difficult to have those practical sessions and really, as I said earlier, interactive sessions so that makes to the building of the knowledge that we have. So thank you so much for sharing your views. It was really nice from our daily things to listen to children and to listen to their views. Really, thank you so much for
Thank
connecting.
you. Thank you.
So now we come back to our medical field. So we have now Dr. Anshu Srivastav, who is a professor in the Department of Pediatric Gastroenterology. We have seen that there have been challenges for COVID-19 patients and also for non-COVID diseases. So we have over time, in the last few months, we've seen that patients with non-COVID diseases have also suffered. So we like Professor Anshu Srivastav to present her views on the challenges that the children have faced with non-COVID diseases, medical diseases during the time of COVID-19. Dr. Anshu Srivastav.
Thank you, Vinita. Good afternoon, and respected seniors and dear friends. What we have to talk about today is the problems which we are facing in the management of non-COVID children. So apart from the regular thing which this COVID has caused, and that includes difficulty in assessing healthcare, there is constraints of financial things because of the extra amount of money which has to be spent in getting tests, the travel restrictions, the environment of fear. All that has contributed to the patients seeking medical attention a little late than what is normal. And we have seen our patients who are coming late with, and in some cases we have been able to salvage them, in some cases we have not been able to salvage them, because for example, say a child who's coming to us with variceal bleeding and shock, which we have not lost in the last 10 years, the first time this year we have lost a kid, and that's because of the difficulties in getting medical attention. The second problem which we are facing is that certain drugs which are not required on a daily basis. For example, again, I'll quote from our GI and liver practices, like penicillamine. They are not available in the smaller cities and the villages. So the patients are unable to procure these medications, and because of the added travel restrictions, the compliance and the children are going off the medications for months together, which is again causing their disease to go progress, and it is not giving the expected amount of control which we would have faced, or which we would have wanted to have a control. That kind of a compliance with the chronic medications is not there. The third problem which we are facing is that the younger children, they are dependent upon the adults for the prompt recognition of their problems, especially infants. We have an infant who's jaundiced, his jaundice is increasing, or if we have a small baby who's becoming lethargic, the parents are the ones who notice that and get the child to immediate attention. But because the parents are having so many other issues, that their attention is diverted, and that's another reason why these children are coming late to us. Their medication compliance is difficult, and some of them who are requiring specific dietary interventions, there also the medications and the drug and the diet is not being given or not being followed with that much of sincerity as it was being done earlier, because the parents have lost their jobs, they are difficult in getting the things, so they are facing so many difficulties that the child's healthcare becomes a smaller thing as compared to the normal times when the child was at the top priority because rest other problems were sorted out or were settled. The third thing which we are having is the issue with online consultations. When we are having an online consultation, which is now the norm in the current COVID days, when we are dealing with an adult or with a very older child, it's okay. But again, when we have a smaller child and the parents have to interpret the symptoms, there is a bias of both under-reporting and over-reporting. And we have to base our judgment on this telephonic information that we are getting, which may not always be as accurate or as reliable as when I see a child face to face and I can easily assess him much better than what I get to hear from the parents, because we ask them for any symptom. The symptom may not be as accurately assessed by the parents as a medical professional would be able to do that. Then when we are seeing them online, we have to get tests done. And not all tests are available in the periphery or in the villages or in the smaller cities. For example, we have a lot of patients whose medications like anticoagulants have to be based on the results of the PT-INR. And a little bit this side or that side can have long-term consequences. The stents may get blocked. But the peripheries, we have to depend upon the reports that we are getting. But at the heart, I am not really sure about the reliability of those reports, because our health system is not as well developed in the villages or smaller town as it is developed in the bigger cities, and most of our patients are residing still in smaller towns and villages, so they are having problems. Then these restrictions which we were talking, Dr. Sutelo was also talking, they are causing isolation amongst the children. And this is one group where we are dealing with children with functional GI disorders. For example, a child with pain abdomen. It is very difficult to assess and differentiate how much of this pain abdomen is actually due to the disease and how much of this pain abdomen is actually a reflection of the anxiety and the isolation and the anger in the child which he is facing because of the, so these symptoms, these somatic symptoms are manifesting. And for us to differentiate in patients who are having these baseline diseases of pain abdomen and other functional disorders is becoming a bigger and bigger problem, because we cannot differentiate that. And then when we have sick children who require a multi-speciality care, like a patient comes to me, I need the consultation from endocrine, pediatric surgery, from dietitian, and they come to us, all of us can gather together in the regular functioning days in a day, and within 4 hours, everything is sorted out and the patient can be given the best possible care. Now in the times of COVID, because of restricted availability of all the levels of care, and even doctors, because many of them are posted in COVID duties. So these cross consultations, these combined, the children with complex problems who need a multi-speciality care, no matter how hard we try, we are not able to give of that quickness or that promptness of care which we were able to give in the pre-COVID times. So I would like to summarize by saying that apart from all the problems which all people, adults, irrespective of age, are facing in assessing healthcare, children are becoming more difficult to manage non-COVID problems in them, because they are dependent on adults who are being stressed. And so the quality of care which they can give to their baby, especially the underprivileged section of the society, may not be as well. Second, children don't give us that much of time. They need a prompt attention and they need quick care. The more is the delay, the outcome may be bad. So because of their dependence and because of the time frame in which they need to be dealt with or offered Medicare care is very small or very short, I think they pose greater problems. And in our opinion, when we do these monthly audits of ours in our department, we find that we are losing children even at home. They have not been able to reach the medical care. So there are problems, and which I think will be sorted out only once we can effectively control this COVID situation, because the rest of the things which we can do, we are doing. So it is a problem for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. That was Dr. Anshu. That was really nice. Of course, highlighting the problems that we have been facing. Though we have been trying, and the institute has been trying to have online consultations, we completely agree with you that this multi-speciality outlook, referrals, and other problems will be, they are more magnified in children as compared to adults, because their problems are not, they have to be brought up by somebody, the parents, and they cannot themselves present it. And of course, there is a lot of, there are a lot of issues related to it. Thank you so much, Dr. Anshu, for presenting that scenario. Now we move on to Dr. Bhatia, madam. Dr. Vijay Lakshmi Bhatia, she is a professor in the Department of Endocrinology, and she has been dealing with children and especially diabetic children, and we understand that there is a lot of issues that are there. So we'll like to connect with Dr. Bhatia to present her
Thank you,
views.
Vinita. Good afternoon, everyone. I think that my the thoughts which I will share will largely echo what Dr. Anshu has just spoken. I would like to share my thoughts mainly based upon our children with life-threatening conditions like diabetes, adrenal insufficiency, pituitary hormone insufficiencies, neurosurgical follow-ups with their fluid management issues, among other chronic diseases which are less life-threatening. We look after more than 500-600 children and adolescents with type 1 diabetes on a regular basis, of which about half of them come to us every 3 months, year after year, for HbA1c and other checkups, and to issue medicines which are much cheaper in our HRF pharmacy than outside. And the other half, that is another 300 patients, come less often, like about once in 6 months to 12 months. Our hospital made immediate arrangements to secure the OPD HRF pharmacy for those patients who could reach us. But I say with great sadness that the number who managed to reach us was throughout the months until about October was hardly 10% of our total who used to come every 3 months. In this whole time, practically no new child with diabetes was admitted in our ward till October. Normally, this number would have been at least 40 to 50 new diabetic children by that time. Where did they go? Could they get any medical care? We have absolutely no idea even of the missing children. The reasons for patients not reaching us, as Anshu has already highlighted, included economic and logistical problems. Public transport was unavailable and private transport became terribly expensive, and job losses and economic slowdown were disastrous. National and statewide lockdowns were followed by a complicated geography of local lockdowns, but also again, Anshu mentioned it, there was an irrational fear among most of the patients of actually entering the campus of the hospital. Somehow they felt that coronavirus is kind of spreading all over the air in our hospital campus. They would prefer to get their tests or something done elsewhere in a private lab and talk to us by phone rather than come here to get anything done. Even for those who reached our gates, it was almost near impossible for them to enter the hospital building because of the rules which understandably our hospital had made for the safety of the staff. And so that they could hardly make use of their money in the PED accounts. So our senior residents had often to rise to the occasion, ferrying prescriptions and Aadhaar Patras to them on the road outside the OPD building so that they could issue their medicines from the HRF pharmacy. My faculty colleagues and I, on many an occasion, stood on the road or the lawn outside the telemedicine gate in order to have a quiet place to stand there and counsel the father of a critically admitted child, as only the child and the mother were COVID negative and admitted, and the father could not gain access into the ward as he was not COVID tested. I'm not saying this to highlight what we did, but to highlight the severe mental stress under which such the parent would have been. And this happened on so many occasions. Telemedicine guidelines actually were a boon. They were legalized by Medical Council of India, and they were a use the digital platform with full legal protection. Communication with patients was bidirectional. It was very effective and it became widely used, and everyone in my department was actually happy that we were able to deliver at least this much to the patients under full legal protection. However, there were impediments in our being able to connect with the local pediatricians caring for our chronic disease patients. This included they're being too busy catering to and doing the COVID duties as required by the government, and also having an incomplete expertise in the local hospitals to deal with these complex chronic diseases such as which come in my department and which Dr. Anshu had also highlighted. Nevertheless, in the midst of all this, we had selected instances of absolute brilliance from private pediatricians who dealt with new patients with very complex conditions, consulting us via telephone and digital image sharing. Non-availability of medicines was a big issue. Our children with diabetes not only could not get their brand of insulin, but they often had to choose an insulin with a different pharmacokinetic profile than what they were using hitherto. The problem was compounded by the fact that in smaller places, pharmacies are not actually pharmacies with a pharmacist in attendance. They are actually just a shop, just like any other. Nutrition for our children with chronic disease has always been precarious at the best of times due to the high cost of protein-rich foods and of fresh fruit and vegetable which contain minerals and vitamins. This was now compounded by the economic slowdown and could have affected the chronic disease of many of our children. However, there's a positive note here, which many of the parents spoke out in a survey in which they were participating, which we had done with our diabetic families. They said that there was less opportunity for junk food consumption, and this made us happy. Lastly, I feel the lack of school and no structure to the day and lost opportunities for exercise and play activities and personality development, which is so eloquently pointed out by Kea and Mihir just now, were very important for all the children and also for our children with chronic disease. These are some of the issues which came to my mind when I was penning down these thoughts. I now hand over to my other pediatric colleagues for further insights. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. That was really nice. It was really nice to understand what are the children been facing and what as clinicians you have been wondering about and facing for the children who have not been able to reach the hospital, especially children with chronic diseases and of course with all those acute diseases also. Maybe after this COVID pandemic is over, we will get to know what had happened, and then listening to what they had experienced over time will be really heartening to understand. Thank you, ma'am, for your words. Now we move on to the other speaker. Now we have been talking about medical diseases, but there is another group, that is the patients, the children who have been having cancer. So that is a group that we are also concerned with, because these are patients who need immediate attention. So now I request Dr. Anshul Gupta, who is from the Department of Hematology, to express what is his view about the responsibilities and challenges in managing children with cancer during these times. Over to Dr. Anshul.
Good afternoon, everyone. At the outset, I would like to thank our director, sir, Professor R.K. Dhiman, Professor Sonia Nityanand, our executive registrar, and Professor Vinita Agrawal, member secretary ethics committee, to hold such a good meetings every week regarding the addressing the ethical challenges in patients with during this COVID pandemic. And I will be talking on the moral responsibility and challenges which we face as pediatric oncologists in managing children during this COVID-19 pandemic. So it is one of the most vulnerable population when you are thinking of as a pediatric oncologist. These are the immunocompromised children and probably at increased risk of infection, life-threatening infection. Though formal data is not available from our country, but what we have seen from China, that the cancer patients, both adult as well as pediatric, are posed to develop severe complication in the form of invasive ventilation and developing ICU stay during their treatment. And apart from this, we have seen that during this COVID-19 pandemic, what we have noticed in the OPD, that the timely diagnosis of cancer has been a great challenge in majority of these patients. So all the new cancer cases need extensive evaluation. And because of the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a lockdown across the country, and these children cannot come to the major hospitals. As we all know that pediatric oncology centers are very limited across our country, and none of the private pediatricians or local physicians are really trained in dealing with these cases. So normally they are just showing up to those local physicians and their symptoms are getting delayed. And when they are presenting to us, already the disease is at its advanced stage. Apart from this, for patients who are being referred to a higher center, they were finding patients were saying that we were not getting travel passes, we were not getting any travel support, and we were just stopped by the security policeman that you can't go to that hospital, it's a countrywide lockdown. And because of that, they had to stay at their home. So the second important challenge which I saw during my as a pediatric oncologist was the treatment delay. As we all know, when the COVID pandemic was declared by our Honorable Prime Minister, there were scarcity of beds. Our health system is already overstressed. And on the top of it, we had this problem of dealing with this COVID-19 pandemic. So definitely our bed strength was insufficient to adjust these pediatric oncology cases into the for admission and treatment. So majority of patients were getting long dates for admission. They could not be admitted for chemotherapies. They were not able to get radiotherapy on time. The surgeries were delayed. There was a time when all surgeries were put on hold because there were no guidelines for which patients really require surgery, what precautions you have to take while operating a patient who could be a COVID-19 positive. So all this led to great treatment delay. Apart from this, the manpower support was also suboptimal. Majority of the doctors were diverted to COVID treatment facilities. So the remaining doctors who were looking after the non-COVID services were really scarce, and they were overburdened with the non-COVID work. So definitely there were problems in managing these children. As far as the diagnostics is concerned, there were issues in definitely the labs, because the labs were also burdened, and being a pediatric oncologist, we solely rely on lab diagnostic for our treatment. We have some certain specialized investigations, and at the time of COVID pandemic, we really faced problems in getting those reporting done. And as far as the kids who were admitted, our sick kids who were critically ill, who were admitted in the ICU, the physicians were finding it difficult to manage them because all the pediatric patients were being clubbed with the adult patients. There was no trained pediatric intensivist or pediatrician itself who can take care of that. And apparently they were being managed by adult physicians, though they were managed very beautifully, but the nursing staff, the doctors, all were really underconfident in managing such a small kids. Another important challenge, which as a pediatric oncologist we faced, was shortage of blood components. Their lockdown drastically reduced the number of voluntary blood donation across the country. And during that time, our branch, as far as hematological malignancies are concerned, as soon as we give chemotherapy, these patients require a lot of transfusion, be it packed cell transfusion or platelet transfusions. And we were finding it difficult to manage these patients because there were no donations. There was significant delay and postponement of intensive chemotherapies, and even the stem cell transplant of many patients was delayed in lieu of that because they were not able to arrange the blood donors, and these intensive chemotherapies are not possible without that. The social and psychological impact was another additional burden to these kids. The families of these children were really stressed with the fear of infection, delayed treatment, need for prolonged unexpected stay due to lockdown, lack of availability of accommodation because majority of patients have to stay nearby to the hospital. So they were not finding any accommodation to stay. And financial implications, cost of treatment. Every time they were being tested for COVID-19, and that was costing rupees 1,500, and that was adding on to their cost. So all these things led to great social and psychological impact on the children as well as their families. And one important thing which I noticed when I was posted in a COVID hospital during my duty was that the small kids really get threatened when they see children, physicians wearing PPE kit. They think as if we have some aliens coming from some other planet and we are just, so they get frightened by our looks only, and they'll just keep very cranky, keeps on crying. So these are very psychological issues. A psychological impact was there on these kids. So I feel that it was really a difficult time for us. As a physician, we hold a moral responsibility, and the most important is that we should hold a compassion and empathy during this time towards these children, because they are the most vulnerable group. And we should strengthen our telehealth consultations by which they can at least communicate to the physician at the time of their need. There should be a 24/7 pediatrics helpline number, so that at least the parents, if they face any difficulty post chemotherapy, they can freely contact and someone can guide them that what needs to be done at their local place. And there should be a very we should strengthen the relation with the local physicians, because they are the ones, they are the main manpower who will manage these cancer patients at their local place. So we should guide them that what needs to be done, and probably by our guidance we can definitely come to a we can improve the situation that is presently prevailing in our country. And as far as the COVID positive patients are concerned, we should club all COVID positive patients in a single cubicle or a single ward, so that a dedicated pediatric nurse or a dedicated pediatric resident or a doctor physician can be posted. So they are more versed with managing these children, and their children also feel more comfortable with such the health personnel. And we should encourage people for voluntary health blood donations. That is most important. We should publicize in social media, Facebook, WhatsApp, that all the healthcare workers who are involved, who are already coming to the hospital, we should donate blood, because that's the lifeline. But blood has no replacement. No medicine can replace the blood. So we should encourage more of these such donations, and we should counsel their families, the parents' family. We should give them time to allay their fear and anxiety during this time, and also educate them about the universal precautions to be followed during this COVID-19 pandemic. So to conclude, delivering cancer care during pandemic is challenging, given the risks from death from cancer versus death from infection. And the likelihood of severe illness from COVID-19 definitely is higher among patients with cancer. And strike a balance that needs to be created, keeping in mind risk associated with COVID-19 and timely management of a child with cancer. Thank you.
Thank you, Anshul, for a very nice talk, highlighting the challenges in the management of children with and without COVID-19. And you brought out very, very important things like, the delay in the patient reaching a tertiary care center, the delay in the diagnosis, and the difficulties which have been encountered in the management of these children, especially in terms of transfusion support. But at the end of the day, I am the same department. We have, put our efforts to do whatever we can in, treating these children and not denying them the treatment that is needed. One very important thing which I think Dr. Vijayalakshmi Bhatia brought out is that we've often wondered where non-COVID illness does not stop, and where have all these patients, especially children with cancers, gone in this lockdown period, because the new cases which presented to our department really decreased in this period. It's something which bewilders. Did they die, or what happened, or they went to local hospitals? We don't know. Probably that answer will come in gradually. Thank you, Anshul. It was a lovely talk, and you really brought out some very important and sensitive issues. And now we move on to Professor Preeti Dabarghav, who is in the Department of Endocrinology. She's also a pediatric endocrinologist, and she is going to cover a very important aspect in the management of the COVID-19 positive children, the lessons that we have learned. Dr. Preeti.
I should thank the director and all of you for organizing such good meetings, monthly meeting on ethics. It's really important. And when Vinita asked me to speak on this, it made me think that, is this pandemic all negative? I think one positive which we can take from this pandemic is that at least the number of children who have been infected with this virus, or the number of children, in spite of us having 40% population as young adolescents and children, the number of children who have been infected with this disease is less. Although the children will have the same kind of pathophysiology, and if they have comorbidities, they are likely to have the same chances of admission and severity of infection, and with comorbidities, probably the end result also would be bad. But the absolute numbers, at least that is positive. But then in the healthcare system which is available in our country, it is the principle of all hands on deck. We need all kinds of cadre of healthcare workers, be the class 4 employees, the attendants, the nurses, the doctors. All of us have to put in or chip in to provide healthcare to these COVID positive patients. So exactly the point which Anshul brought out, that the children who are COVID positive, they get admitted into the same hospital where adults are. So what are the problems when we have children and adults in the same, say, ward or in the same building? First of all, none of us adults like to go to the hospital, get pricked and prodded and asked to follow a regimen. So how do we expect children to like it, or at least accept it calmly without being cranky or crying? It's asking too much from them. The other thing is that we, when they are admitted in a general ward, probably they are well lit with all, they can view outside. But when children are admitted to intensive care, you are on a bed with a ventilator, a BiPAP machine, 4 infusion pumps. Just imagine a tiny 5-year-old who maybe say 20, 25 kilos on a bed which is for an adult. The small size child sitting, lying on the bed with so many machines surrounding him. And then comes the nurse, that temperature lena hai, or she can't touch, so temperature nahi lena hai, but injection lagana hai, drip change karni hai. The poor child can't even see the face of who's administering what to him or her. And then the doctor comes. Normally, all of us who deal with children, we are used to having lots of nice toys, colored, or you have some pictures to make them comfortable in their beds. But here you have these Star Wars or Aliens 2 or Avatar characters coming from these movies, just walking down, and what you can see are just these 2 eyes. And if your goggles are not fogged, then you can still see those eyes. Otherwise, if sometimes there's some problem with your goggles and they are fogged on the screen, you can't even see those 2 eyes. And somebody talking to you through 3 layers of masks, does the child even understand what we are talking to them? So you can imagine the scare which they will have. So I agree with Anshul absolutely that probably if we could have just a small ward, say, decide from the kind of admissions we have had for children, and dedicate one small cubicle only for pediatric patients so that they are looked after by pediatricians. In most of our postings, we did try to have one faculty with pediatric background so that they could help out with the medical issues or the management issues which other wards faced. But the residents, the nurses, obviously they are scared to deal with children who are 4 or 5, maybe 10, 12 years older children can still be managed by all of us. But children who are less than 10 years or who are tiny or who have other comorbid conditions, like during our posting, we had this child with ALL whose blood counts were rock bottom. And Anshul knows that every other day I would be calling him up, although I'm a pediatrician, but still I would be calling him up and asking him, his hemoglobin is not rising, he's having neutropenic fever, what should we do? So these kind of problems probably can be taken care of if we have dedicated staff who's trained to look after children. Maybe not possible everywhere, but wherever it is possible, it could be done. We have most of the institutes and hospitals have tried to do, but we could look into it and do it more systematically and methodically. The second thing which is really important is that if you have COVID, if the child has COVID, what does the family do? Like we had a patient, same child who had ALL, whom I was talking to you about earlier. His family, the mother actually was COVID negative, but she, after a lot of discussion and explaining to her, after understanding that she could become COVID positive, she went and stayed with the boy inside the hospital because the boy he was barely 4.5 or 5 years old. He was just not in a condition to stay on his own all the time, 24/7, being looked after by people whom he doesn't even know. So that is another issue. Allow the family or the family members to go in. And then when the child became sick, the mother could not handle it because it was very touch and go. And it was really possible that we would have lost the child in the night. So what did the family do? The mother, since she could not take it, she went out and the father came in. So now we have exposed both the parents to COVID, and they have two others, one older and a younger sibling. Who looks after those children? Luckily, they had a good family support, but it's not possible for everyone to have that kind of a family support. So we then look towards society to help us. But then that is really an ethical issue morally, I don't know, did we do it correct and let the family go in and become infected? That I don't know whether we did the right thing or not, but it has to be thought about. Then there was this another 10-year-old boy. These are experiences which I gathered. I'm just sharing those. And his family was so scared and they didn't want to go in. So this 10-year-old boy was all alone on the bed for 5 days. And the kind of food which was being given, a 10-year-old boy, you don't expect to like the hospital food. So one of the faculty who was posted in that ward, it was such a sweet thing she did, Shubha Phadke, who's a medical geneticist. She actually took a pack of cream biscuits, sat down on the side of the bed and fed the boy. You can't imagine the joy or the happiness or the glee, the smile the boy had. So how do we manage a child, or what should we be doing for a boy or children whose families are unable to get in? How do we support them? What kind of a management do we do for them? So probably it could be addressed again by having a dedicated ward for these children. Then coming to the actual management of COVID positive, as we all know that all kinds of treatments and therapies are actually tried on adults and then they percolate onto their users in children. I can say about all kinds of treatments for type 2 diabetes that they've all been tried in adults. If they prove beneficial and don't cause any harm, then they are tried in children. But this disease, it's not even giving us time. We don't know much about this disease. It's an unknown territory. So all those treatments are still called as investigational. Some studies say they are good, they are beneficial. Some say that no benefit was there. And we have to still bank on that experience and use it in children. So again, that is also an issue, and maybe research, children also have to be included in all kinds of clinical trials to give us the answers that are these drugs beneficial. So in nutshell, or to conclude, I could say that there are issues about managing children by specifically trained paramedical staff and pediatricians, and then the support or the care provider, can they be allowed to go into the COVID, if they are negative, to be allowed to go into the COVID wards to be able to look after their children. I think these were the two major burning issues which I felt had to be brought up. Thank you.
Thank you, Preeti, for bringing out some very, very important points about, the treatment of these children with COVID-19, very pertinent things about their management with a pediatric skilled team, and number one, and number two, the allowing, parents to be with these children, because there is no doubt that, if secure and happy, the recovery is faster. So very important, and it's a very important perspective that you brought out. And even more important than that, what you brought out is very important, that in parallel, there should be intense research about the treatment strategies and prevention by vaccine in children also, because they are a vulnerable age group. And sometimes what happens in adults may not be totally applicable. Thank you so much, Preeti, and also for your hands-on experiences, very touching and very nice experiences. So, do we have any questions? If anyone wants to ask any questions from any of the speakers or give their comments, we'll be very happy to receive them.
Ma'am, you're muted.
Yes.
So if we don't have any further, are there any questions or comments from the audience? Anyone would like to give any comments? So if not, then I would like to again thank all the speakers, and especially our two students, but each and every one for joining us and contributing towards this symposium, on this mini symposium on ethics in children in COVID-19, during the COVID-19 pandemic, giving your views, your perspectives, and it has enlightened us and enriched us, and I think it will improve further our COVID-19 care in pediatric patients, as well as and protect and also help us in the management of our non-COVID-19 positive children during this pandemic period. Thank you very much, everyone, and all the participants also. Just wait, we'll have a little